Hello friends, how are you? I'm Ari Theriger and today I'm going to talk about Algiz, which means elk. A rune often considered to be linked with protection, but Algiz is also the representation of the higher self. Higher self as in to be in connection with the gods. This rune represents the spiritual state of listening, to be attentive to what surrounds us, beyond our perceptions of the physical world. We use our senses to be in contact with our own world, but at a certain point in life we switch our sensibility into, a more sensitive state of mind. Instead of hearing, we listen, and instead of knowing, we understand. And this rune represents that very state of mind, awakening. We get closer to the divine, to a protective teaching force, into a spiritual sense of safety and protection. We are not certain what exactly the shape of this rune represents. Some runes are quite clear in their representations, always a stylized form somehow of their basic meanings. But maybe Algiz is the representation of the elk or stag's antlers, which is the means of protection and defense of the animal and also its magnificent crown, reaching high into the skies, which might connect this rune to the cosmic stags that constantly bite at the needles of the world tree Yggdrasil. And if we look close at the common yew leaves, they certainly resemble the shape of Algiz, and this sense of awakening and being in contact with the divine sphere is easily perceptible by the representation of the world tree itself, which connects the mortal realm to the spiritual realm and with the divine realm. The Old Norse word for this rune is Irwar, which either means yew tree or yew bow. Maybe the representation of the stags biting the needles of the great world tree is the representation of mankind, the representation of the human life and spirit, trying to reach the world of the gods. The stags are constantly nibbling at the world tree, just as we humans are always striving to have a little taste of the various spiritual forces that might connect us with the divine. The stags have a taste of the world tree, and the world tree is the metaphorical representation of what lies between the physical and the spiritual, the very pathway in between that links both realities. The name of this rune in the younger Futhark is Ýr, which means you. So through time it didn't lose its connection with the world tree Yggdrasil. Or maybe this rune can also be the stylized representation of ravens' feet, of the ravens of Odin, Hugin and Munin, Ugr and Mini, thought and memory. The representation of the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, where we store the knowledge we gain in the waking world, the knowledge of the past and the present, which gives us insight into the future, and where we store the ancestral memory, the memory printed in our DNA, the past experiences of our ancestors that gives us knowledge, stored in the depths of our very existence, that makes us act on certain occasions, on impulse and by instinct. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, both combined and at work with one another, we awake the hidden secrets deeply stored in our mind. And so we awake and reach a higher understanding. But it's also curious to know that Algiz in Gothic means swan. So indeed, the form of this rune might be the stylized representation of birds' feet, flying high into the skies and back. In Norse mythology, Valkyries, are protective spiritual beings who either fly by means of magical cloaks made of swan feathers, or they themselves can shapeshift into swans. Protective beings, life-giving and power-giving spiritual entities. The spiritual beings in between by which Odin himself communicates with is chosen warriors. So it does seem that this rune indeed represents the connection between the divine and humanity. It represents the very force that catches our attention and attracts our consciousness towards the divine realm. Algiz is the force that awakens the mind, and so our consciousness is able to pass through the physical into the spiritual. It crosses worlds, or rather, it crosses perception, because life is nothing more than a certain perspective whose limitations must be crossed in order to change that perspective and learn about new perceptions. Algiz is the rune of consciousness and awareness. Just look at the rune. Doesn't it also resemble the stylized representation of a human being with its arms stretched out upwards, with its legs close together and feet firmly planted on the ground? As I've said before, if I'm not mistaken, on the video about Megin, in many cultures, the reception of the divine power is through the hands. One of the most ancient performances in various religious ceremonies is precisely extending the arms upward with open hands and palms outward to receive the divine power and to give our own power to the divine. But more about that on the video about Megin, which now I recommend you to watch. Before we jump into the meaning of this rune when it appears in a rune reading, I would like to give you a few notes on the figure of the elk. And you will understand why, because it's intimately tied with this rune. As previously mentioned, indeed the elk's antlers or horns in appearance seem indeed to resemble the shape of this rune. The elk or stag motif in religious terms was highly significant among ancient European peoples: Celtic, continental Germanic, Norse, Iberian, Slavic, etc. The coming of manhood by killing a stag in a ceremonial hunting. It's a strong, fast, agile animal, very powerful and sexually vigorous. To ancient Indo-European peoples, the stag wasn't the king of the animals, that was the bear, but the stag was regarded as the lord of the forest, an animal whose antlers resemble the very branches of trees, as if the animal was wearing a crown made of forest itself. The stag must have played a very important role in the economy of the ancient European cultures. It provides food, the skin provides clothing, and its bones and antlers can be turned into tools and weapons. But regarding the hunting of this animal, during the Mesolithic at least, human communities would never hunt the dominant male. The dominant male is the only one that is capable of reproducing with the females. Without the dominant male, there is no reproduction and therefore not a continuation of the species, which means no food for human communities. So the dominant male was never hunted. Our Mesolithic ancestors were very careful in their management of resources. So this obviously created spiritual and religious motifs around the dominant male. The elk and the stag with their fully developed antlers marking their adulthood and status of dominance, became a symbol of leadership, pride, strength, sexual vigor, etc. The white stag or elk to the Norse was a symbol of divine blessing and protection. The elk is also a totem animal of shamans. Many Indo-European gods, who are generally collectively regarded as kernunos, are gods with antlers. One of Odin's names is Elgr, which means elk. And Odin's Germanic predecessor, Udanas and Waden, was the antlered leader of the wild hunt, the Hornet Gods of ancient Europe. These are representations of the divinity in both the earthly realm and otherworldly realm. All these Hornet Gods are figures both connected to nature but also death, and riding through the skies, or being entities of the natural world but somehow always connected with the underworld or the other world. The traditional worshippers of the pagan Hornet Gods had a hand gesture of the representation of the antlers of the Hornet Gods, a gesture toward of evil spirits. Being gods of both the earth and the underworld, they were regarded as gods of protection. And the ancient gesture of the Hornet Gods to call upon them to ward off evil spirits is this. The symbol of the horns nowadays people use a lot in music festivals, which is in fact the symbol of three antlers of the hornet deities of ancient Europe, and the symbol of protection, and the very symbol of Algiz itself. Now, the meaning of this rune when it appears in a rune reading. Algiz is the supreme rune of protection. Algiz was used as the magical sign not only to protect oneself but the entire family as well. So it was indeed regarded as a very powerful magical symbol of protection, and again to ward off evil spirits. So the appearance of Algiz in a rune reading in its upright position suggests that there will be a successful outcome in a particular enterprise, a certain project, a business, activity or plan that you have put all your effort into. In elf terms, it indicates that a problem will be overcome and that help will be given to you by a caring entity, someone close to you. So, in its upright position, this rune assures you that you are protected from any possible danger. Life is full of surprises, and some are not that positive. It's a world filled with threats. But Algiz indicates that you are well prepared. It's a shield that protects you from harm. However, Algiz may be a warning of something that you must be on your guard against which. Courage in the face of fear. Controlling your emotions is of the utmost importance in times of transition and accelerating changes in the course of your life. New opportunities and challenges will likely appear in your life, and with such challenges it may come undesirable influences. So in order to reach the higher self, you must constantly challenge yourself. That might be the greatest challenge coming your way. So you must be careful. You must protect yourself against your own judgment. But give enough ground to mentally grow. Don't rush to reach a higher state of mind. Go slowly, one step at a time, and protect yourself from your own eagerness to evolve. Be aware that right actions and right conduct is your only protection. And if you feel pain, observe your own pain, be with it and learn with it. Do not try to cover it and escape from life by denying what is happening to you. Acknowledging your pain is your protection against trauma, and in that way you grow. This rune marks a time in your life solely for you. Its main message is that you should take time for yourself. If you don't look after yourself, then you will be in no position to look after anyone else in the future. Now, when this rune appears in its inverted position, on a rune reading or rune divination, etc., this rune reinforces the message of its upright position. Health problems are occurring or will occur very soon, so you do need to concern with yourself and your welfare. The demands of others should be a secondary consideration, or not to be considered at all at this point. Again, if you don't look after yourself, then you will be in no position to look after anyone else in the future. Certainly, people are quite selfish, and you may indeed witness that firsthand. People may refuse to recognize that you are overburdened and weary. Inverted Algiz will show you the insensitivity of those around you and towards you. So you might fall into the mistake of agreeing with what is being demanded of you, so you can just have a moment of peace. Don't commit that mistake. Algiz signals that you must retreat from the overwhelming demands of others and find a place for you to rest, to have peace of mind, to heal, to slow down. Algiz signals a period of recuperation, rehabilitation, regeneration, so allow yourself the time to regain your strength. When this rune appears in its inverted position, your defenses are down and you are vulnerable to danger, and people might take advantage of that. You must change your habits that leave you open to harm. Danger is ahead, so be attentive and minimize the possibility to fall into danger. Be careful about your own health and do not overload yourself with the burdens that others carry. And do not worry whether your initiatives succeed or not. You may not win, but you will never lose, because you can always learn from what is happening to you. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video, and as always, April.